This is Two Chicks Talkin Flicks, where we review movies. Love them or hate them, someone's got to do it. So enjoy the show. Hi, I'm Sarah, and this is Two Chicks Talkin Flicks and anything else that gets in the mix. And today I am joined by Robert Holler from Open to Work Journeys with Robert Holler podcast. Hi.
Hey, good day, Sarah.
Good day. So tell my listeners what your podcast is about.
Absolutely. So the show had its debut in August, but the story behind it began earlier this year. I was in the midst of a pretty, all things considered, going well career, hitting about 16 years with the same company, working in plasma procurement, which is, people are familiar with the idea of plasma donation centers. I work in that arena. Well, at least worked, I should say, because at a point in February, sort of completely out of the blue, unexpected, I was literally out visiting one of the centers I was responsible for in another state. I was a part of a mass job elimination of about 2,300 people in the middle of the week, right after Valentine's Day. So I get to refer to it now as the, post-Valentine's Day massacre when I talk about it with folks that are familiar. But regardless, in and around this time, I had already been feeling a little disconnected with where things were going in my career. And I just started giving some heavy consideration to all of it. What do I want to do? And then I started thinking more about what I might do if I didn't want to have to worry about a paycheck for a little bit. Or as a good friend put it more profoundly, what would you do if you knew you could not fail?
Yeah.
And for me, the answer was easy because it had been on my mind for a long time: podcasting. So I got some of the Betty Basic equipment amassed and was ready to start dipping my toes into the question of what the heck am I getting myself into? And then this all happened unexpectedly, and it hit hard, as it does for a lot of people. And it was the second hit in my household, as my spouse worked for the same company and got let go a couple months prior due to a positional redundancy. So needless to say, we had a couple of stories of professional life journeys, and then suddenly it puts you on this new path. And, I was quick to learn that the term was coined #open to work for the folks that suddenly find themselves out there on the job hunting front in need of a new job because they no longer have one.
Yeah.
And I started to realize that this label meant more than just looking for employment. It's about what you do with both sides of the work-life balance and the choices we make to evolve when we experience seasons of change in our lives. I believed I had a story to tell, and that I was certain I wasn't alone. So I take pride in helping and developing others. And suddenly my journey into podcasting had its origin story. So we examined what being open to work really means and the journeys that brought us to being so via interviews, reflective discussions, and personal evolution, with an assist from pop culture along the way, not going to lie. The goal is to feature people actively pursuing opportunities or those with great lessons to impart from their own experiences in these stages of life. One of my little sayings I like to say is, and it kind of, I think it encapsulates it pretty well, is we're all in this together,
Yeah. Yeah. I actually have my own journey with, getting laid off. It's happened to me thrice. The first one was I worked for MJ Designs, which is like Michael's, the craft store. His son had a craft store, and it was called MJ Designs. And I found out with my whole family sitting in front of the TV like a week or two before Christmas, and they had like a little bloop coming up next, local hobby store files for chapter 11. And I was like, oh, I wonder who that is. Found out it was my job. Not even people at my work knew. It happened, and the news found out first before we even knew it happened. And then the second and third time, I had made it through the first set of layoffs and didn't make it through the next. And so One of them at one company, they laid off people the day before our holiday party. Like, who does that?
Oh, yeah.
They're like, hey, we're going to have a party tomorrow. It's going to be expensive. Let's get rid of some of these people now. What? Yeah. So fun times to, by the time the third time happened, I already kind of, when I saw that people were being laid off, I had already started looking for another job. And the first time it happened, I'd already gotten a second job because I wanted to work 2 jobs so I could make some extra money. And then luckily I had that other job to fall on when we got laid off.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I could see the forest for the trees, through the trees, whatever the phrase is.
Yeah.
And I was actually in discussions with a startup company right before, it was all happening as this occurred. So as soon as I found myself sitting at home on the couch, the first thing I thought was, this might turn out completely fine. But then, of course, they asked me there was one last interview to go through, and they asked me, hey, we've heard some things from this company. Were you affected? I had to be honest. And I don't know if it turned them off or what, but what became the very recurring theme of my experience from the point I lost my job up till now was every major job hiring decision has to have a second place. Now imagine you have just been second place 6 times in a row. It started with that right there. I got through every round of interviews you could possibly imagine with every person they throw in front of you, and it's all gone lovely. But then they decide, we went with the other candidate. And that has occurred, like I said, as I alluded to, more than once since then, and as I've gone through this process. And again, I've just taken it as a lot of very unique learning experiences that at the very least I can try to grow from and maybe help entertain or inform others that are kind of going through these stages or just getting ready, just having entered these stages. So again, a lot of what the podcast goes for. I hear what you're saying though about some of the crazy elements of how you find out. It's almost like you can almost relate sort of to the athlete that finds out they've been traded to a new team at the same time as everyone else on, whatever, whether it's on Sports Center or I guess on X as they call it now.
Yeah. One time I didn't get a job at Blockbuster because they said I didn't have enough movie experience, which all we did was talk about movies in my interview, mind you. But they went with somebody else that had more movie experience. Well, guess who's not here any longer? Blockbuster. And guess who has a movie review podcast? Me. So who won? I did. Just saying. They make terrible decisions at Blockbuster, obviously.
Yeah.
Because I probably would have been like, hey, you should do that Redbox thing or that Netflix thing, maybe you should do that. I would have said that, but it's fine.
Yeah. Maybe start a podcast while you're at it.
Yeah, maybe you should do Blockbuster podcast. So we decided to review Dazed and Confused because the anniversary is passed just a few days ago. It's been 30 years, you said?
That's correct. It was released in theaters on September 24th, 1993.
Yeah, so just a couple days ago. And this is one of my sister's favorite movies. I think I own it on VHS. I'm pretty sure I have it on DVD as well. But I really like this movie.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain I have seen it in every format you possibly could from the point it's been released, except having watched it in the movie theater. I was in middle school, so it had zero connectivity with me at the time. But as I grew to become aware of it and appreciate it later on, yes, it was it's passed along with me through every stage of my adulthood into whatever format has become the in vogue thing, just because it's something I always want there right next to me for at least a good, couple of rewatches annually, or I would say give or take at this point.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was in 5th grade when it came out. So, I don't believe I saw it in theaters. I might have. But I do know I've seen it on TV multiple times. And then also I own it. So, would you want to give just like the quickest overview of what this movie is about for people who may not know?
Absolutely. In shortest form, I would say it's a nostalgia movie that was never intended to be one and perhaps became a cult classic for that reason. But to expand on that just a little bit more, it's centered around the last day of school at a made-up Texas town in 1976. The soon-to-be seniors at the high school are just trying to live their best lives, finally getting their turn at hazing the incoming freshmen on their way to the next great party. The new freshmen just want to survive.
Yeah.
Hilarity, good times, and life lessons ensue. That's what I would say in a nutshell.
I think that's a good nutshell for sure. So is there any part of this movie that stands out that you really love?
There's a lot, to be quite honest. And one thing I love about it is that it all happens in the span of one day. Mm-hmm. But somehow that day just feels like it lasts so long when you watch this movie, which is especially fun. Sorry.
I was going to say, well, that's kind of how kids like you feel like every day it lasts for so long when you're a kid. You know, you just want summer to start, and it's that last day of school that just lingers, and you know. So I feel like that kind of goes right.
Yeah. So I would say the funny thing is since I've dug in a little further and behind this movie, as I've grown to love it and be a tad bit infatuated with it at times, is that there's the original version of it was a far longer movie, but for obvious reasons they wanted it trimmed down to that typical whatever, I don't know, it's maybe an hour and 40 minutes, maybe an hour and 50 minutes. I don't remember right off the top of my head. But regardless, it encapsulates so many aspects of that day, and it just kind of shifts so wonderfully from the school day to the immediate aftermath of the last day of school letting out and what happens as soon as that occurs. And then it goes into, okay, now we're trying to figure out what's happening tonight. And then everybody's sort of just, waiting until the big thing happens. And then boom, it culminates with, the big party at the end. So in terms of what really rings true to me is just how well they do just cling on to that nostalgia for people. Just what you could even remove like the 70s from it. I think maybe that just helps it to be a little bit more simplistic in times. But for me, it just allows an opportunity to kind of take myself back to similar points in time in my life. And to be honest, when I discovered this movie, I was out of high school by the time I did. I was in college, but I was more or less living my own, lower central Michigan version of this life in college with my friends. So it really connected with me in a lot of ways. And I think that's why it still holds a certain added connection for me when I watch it and talk about it to this day.
Yeah, as someone who lives in Texas, I feel like this movie has to be set in Austin because they're very hippie-ish, and now my aunt, she's kind of a hippie, and she grew up in North Texas, close to Dallas, but she's also lived in Colorado and California, where in that time frame, and there's a lot of hippies then too. But I feel like it has to be set in Austin, or trying to make it feel like it was, because in the 70s in Texas, weed is not legal here. They're not cool about it. But Austin, they keep it weird in Austin. And I feel like this is probably set there.
I can totally be on board with that. I think from what I've read about director Richard Linklater, at that point in his career, he was just sort of catching people's attention. He wasn't yet the prominent director that he is known for some more greater hits now in the present day. And I think at the time, like him and his little crew, like that they all worked on each other's films together to try and help each other grow their careers. The original Austin area at the time. So that totally tracks for me when you make that point. So I could see that. Not having lived in Austin, or the most I've ever experienced is driving through it on a long work road trip. But I could totally be on board with that.
So one thing I thought was really funny, in the wood shop classroom, they're, making their paddles. But one of them is making a bong out of wood. And I was in art class all through high school, all through college, and people still make those out of clay. But you'd always have to kind of make it so like the teacher wouldn't know for sure it was a bong. So like they would make the hole, but then they would like cover it with a really, really thin piece of clay so then they can drill it later. So when he's like messing with the bong and wood shop, that's all I could think was, I've seen lots of people make clay bongs.
Yeah, and it really, in that scene, if I recall correctly, Slater's character is providing some like
tutelage,
added, tutelage, quality assurance checks to the final product being created there. And again, it's just very nice to immediately be establishing the notion that this is just business as usual here. Let's just keep moving along.
So we went to high school around the same time. Growing up, when did you clear out your locker and did you leave it a mess? Because I don't understand how they can just walk away. That was not allowed when I was going to school. You had to basically clean it out like the day before the last day of school. Everything had to be checked. Like your teacher had to come check your lockers.
Yeah, that sounds about right from what I remember experiencing. I don't know. I have some visions in my head of high school, like getting out of like a class early to go clean my locker out. And then I just basically grabbed everything in one big armful and just dumped it into the trash can. And what I thought was amusing was my math teacher came by later in the day and he saw like this perfectly fine folder that I had dumped in there, and he just picked it up and just grabbed it and took it away. Just figured, all right, I'm going to repurpose this. And now as a over 40 adult male now, I just look at that and I totally understand where he's coming from. So, but regardless, that was my experience too, that they definitely made sure you had to have that stuff cleaned out before you were walking out the door on the final day. But again, it's a period piece. So maybe that's something they came to learn somewhere around, 78 or 79. Who knows? I
feel like they would have been more strict, So it's so interesting to me when I watch movies that are set like 80s, 90s, beforehand, and they just like throw all the papers down the steps and all that stuff. They always have like a montage of people throwing stuff everywhere. And I'm like, what school is this? That is not the schools I ever went to. So it's like,
very true. But yeah. Sorry, because I will say this, like they do a very good job setting up in those opening scenes while school is still in session.
Yeah.
At the very least, at the high school level, that it's like the inmates run the asylum here, and the teachers are all sort of like semi-hippies to just knowing better than to try and get in the way, and they kind of just go about doing whatever they want. But maybe that's just more about it being the last day of school. Who knows? But I think they certainly do set up the fact that like they're just getting out of the way and just going to worry about the summer help that comes to clear out all the lockers and reset all the combinations. They'll take care of all that stuff. Who knows?
Yeah. My mom, she went to school. She was in high school in the 70s, and she had a teacher when she was in Colorado that would sit on his desk, like cross-legged, just sitting on the desk. And she was like, they were super hippies, but she lived in, Denver, Colorado. So that was a good time for hippies to be teaching. But maybe here in Austin, if that's where they're at, that makes sense. That tracks. So I find it really interesting that Pink's friend is going to have a party because his parents are going to be out of town. and everybody knows that they're coming over to his party. But then his parents find the beer guy. He comes early to deliver the beer, and they decide not to leave for the weekend, and the party's canceled. So many people knew that the party was canceled. They don't have cell phones. They don't have Twitter. How do you think they got that message around to so many people? Because we only see 2 people come by the house. So I wonder, was there a montage that they cut out that maybe showed all these people keep going to the house? Or
exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, to be quite honest, is that it's sort of just an indication of like what the parents' night was going to be like from that point forward, was all of these people showing up all ready to, get drunk, get blazed, get laid, who knows what. And then they just have to, scurry them off. I think that's more than likely, but I think there is something more indicative there. They do kind of show it off at points in the movie when you see, at least pre the late stages of the movie, when everybody's kind of going around town, they're going to this meetup spot, then they're driving, and then they're going to another spot, that people are constantly changing vehicles. I'm staying here. Right. You guys go take off. And then they're changing into this car, and now they're riding with this person. So again, I think that was like I don't even know how to put it. That
telephone.
That was like 1976 texting. I don't know, or social media. So I guess is the closest thing you could get at that time. So I could see how some of it could still track and make sense in terms of the narrative.
I guess they all eventually go to that one, Sonic, but not a Sonic. So maybe they see one person and they tell them, and then someone leaves and they come and they're like, oh, hey, did you hear this party's going to be at this place now? And I guess that could happen. And it seems like it's a small town, but I just found it so interesting that everybody seemed to be like, oh, the party has been moved to this different location. We're all going to show up.
I do feel like they, in terms of the various, what we'll call it, subsects of, or cliques, we'll say, that are represented in the movie, I feel like they do a good job of showing how everybody would ultimately get the news of where the night is ultimately going, because you've got a lot of the people that are more social and they're all flowing in and out of, I don't remember if this is the same as the drive-through, but at least it's like the place they go play pool, the pool hall, the Emporium. And there's a lot of people chit-chatting there, and then again, leaving, going for a car ride with somebody else. But then you have like the 3, we'll call them intellectuals, that are just riding around town wanting to do something with their night, but they can't decide what it is. Mm-hmm. They find out by pulling into the food place, and then ultimately running into Wooderson and crew. And that's how they find out about the party, if I recall the details of the movie correctly. So again, I think they cover it well, but it's a very good question to ask when you think about, in today's day and age, how if you took phones away from the human beings involved, they would have no idea how to make all of that come to fruition. Not at all.
They really wouldn't. They don't even know how to dial out on a phone. They don't have anybody's numbers memorized.
Yeah. If they happen to track down a payphone, they're going to go in there and they're going to be like, what is this thing it needs called change?
Yeah. What is that? Like real bills? I don't know. We actually do this thing where we keep track of payphones. This movie had payphones, so we know that. But yeah, we like to, every once in a while we'll be watching a new movie and we're like, oh my God, it has a payphone. Didn't see that coming. So in my high school, freshmen were called babies. So I think it's funny in this that they give the freshman girls who are going to be cheerleaders pacifiers, because that's how we were referred to as freshmen in high school. Did you guys have anything like that at your school?
Weirdly enough, as I think back on it now, unless there's some repressed memories that maybe we'll touch on today, who knows? I didn't really experience anything along those lines. There was always like maybe it was more of like the emotional abuse side of like the threat of like, it could happen to you. Like they would spread these stories of things that could happen. I will say that I had one instance at a football game where there was an attempt to try and put me into a trash can, but it was more, I felt more about like a little bit more random coming from a group that I was friends-ish with, not like the big, bully guys that were seniors. So who knows if it's relevant or not. But again, it is, I'm glad you start touching on that stage of the movie, because I enjoy it in the way that it's portrayed. But again, it is kind of an elephant in the room when we talk about it in 2023, the idea of hazing, right? So, just put it out there for anybody listening out there. I am not a proponent of hazing. I never took part in hazing. It's not a thing that I, sign off on. And I didn't live in the 70s. I was born in 1981. So I can't speak to what that time was. And again, like you just alluded with the question, by the time I got to high school, there was definitely still stories. It was a much more frequent occurrence of, hazing occurring at every, ways, whether it's sports, fraternities, college level, high school level, you name it. But I don't know. I guess I missed out in my little podunk town that I grew up in.
Yeah, like the hazing that the cheerleaders go through, besides the part where they have to ask the boys to marry them and they will do whatever they want, besides that, I think the hazing that they do is not bad at all. Like, they get some eggs and mustard and ketchup sprayed on them and they have to fry like little piggies. Like, or do the air raids. Not that bad. But maybe getting drenched in the car wash, kind of bad. That probably hurts.
Well, I'll say this, a little bit of the behind the scenes. I'll say, well, the way it's portrayed, yes, I agree. At first, it doesn't look like all that terrible, to be quite honest. But for the actual actresses that had to play the part for that, it was a terrible experience, because they had to be out there for hours. It was like above 90 degree temperatures, and they had to have all this food just stay on them, stuck to them until they could finally get it washed off. So I don't know, in terms of it being as close to the real thing as possible, the people that experienced it, it was not enjoyable, and they were getting paid to do it. Keep that in mind.
Yeah. Cause, I think it was filmed in Texas, right?
Yeah, that's the fun thing about it. It was entirely they kind of almost just took over an area and just brought everybody in for this stretch of time. It was a very fascinating experience from what I've read about it after the fact.
Yeah, and 90 degrees on a black top. Woo, that's going to be hot. Really
exactly.
Hot. But I do love that the nerdy guys or the intellectuals are sitting there talking about it, and they're like, hazing. These parents are letting this happen. They're selling concessions. And everybody's sitting around watching this. It's very weird.
Very true. But also, I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to condone this by any means. It's more about just my brain way overthinking all of this stuff. But when you think about the parents, you got, everybody's a product of their upbringing. So for them, some of this is probably, they look at it like, yeah, this is a rite of passage. You should have seen what I had to go through in my day.
Well, and also it's Texas, and it's cheerleading, and it's football. So of course, that's very big here. Moms would cut off their left arm to get their daughter as a cheerleader. It's a big thing.
Oh, yeah. I can totally understand that, at least from the portrayals and pop culture that I've consumed. Again, having not, I've known parts of Texas, but I've never lived there. But I know it has its own kind of life down there.
Yeah. I also find it just weird that the guys are sitting here watching this. In 2023, watching 17-year-old guys sitting here watching 15-year-old girls or 14-year-old girls get hosed and food dropped all over them, having to beg a guy to marry him, just seems a little creepy. Just a skosh inappropriate.
Yeah, like I said, this is definitely the parts where when I, rewatched it most recently, I start to recognize, okay, I see the cracks in the armor here in terms of its timeless value. But if you just try to I don't remember the exact terminology I want to say here, but just remind yourself like this is portraying a point in time in the 1970s and what would be the reality of this time. And like you said, in Texas, very specifically as well in the, 1976. And you just, and again, knowing that, from what I've understood from a multitude of interviews, articles, books and whatnot, Richard Linklater was looking to make this movie a much more like cynical portrayal of his upbringing in the 70s at that point in time. And it just ended up becoming something else as it went through, the production machine and what have you. But again, I feel like everybody still benefited in the long run because it certainly added to his legacy at the very least.
For sure. I love that Mitch's sister tries to tell the guys to take it easy on him, which only makes them want to beat him up more. And he finds out later, and he's like, of course, no wonder why I was getting it. He was like, how do they even know my name? Like, how did they find me?
Suddenly I just had this weird, like, therapy moment, like, oh my gosh, because it just occurred to me something I had forgotten to mention up until now, that I too had that experience where, much like Mitch, where I was a freshman while my sister was a senior in high school. Mm-hmm. Ironically enough, it happened again in college. We both went to the same college.
Oh, wow.
Enough. But yeah, so maybe when you asked about like, did I experience or see any of that? Maybe she did something and whatever she did actually worked. Who's to say? I might have to ask her the next time I have a little catch up convo. Who's to say?
That's really cool that you guys went to the same college too. That's fun.
It was. I'm not gonna lie. Some of it was more of an economics-based decision. There's like, hey, we'll give you this much of a discount because it's a family discount. Both of you are going in for at least the 1 year. And my mom's like, yeah, I'm not paying, guys. You figure this out. So maybe the less you spend, the better. Okay, thanks, bye. So we were going to the same school, but again, that's my sad. Not my sad. That's way more information than probably anyone cares to know about my backstory for this episode.
Yeah, the people that were freshmen when my sister was a senior were seniors when I was a freshman. So we just missed each other just a bit.
Okay.
So I find it really interesting that Ben Affleck, and like I'd seen this movie several times and didn't realize that Ben Affleck was in the movie when I was younger. Like I knew who Ben Affleck was, but I didn't put two and two together. But he's such a dick in this movie. And I think it's really interesting that it doesn't really seem like people like him. Like they hang out with him, but almost begrudgingly. And he's like Peter Pan. He just won't grow up. He just has to be there and just has to have another senior year where he can beat up on the freshmen. It's very weird.
Yeah. And I'll say this, the fact they introduced him early on as being like someone who failed out of his senior year and now he has to go through it again. Yeah, it kind of, at least in the upbringing I had, it's kind of par for the course for folks that end up in that situation where they can't pull it off and then they have to completely repeat their senior year. It's usually, I don't know. It kind of fits the bill of the character he was portraying there from my perspective. But another thing I will say is, yeah, he's quite baby-faced in this, and it is easy to miss him at first when you first watch. But yeah, he plays the part quite well. I don't know. I feel like a more like adult appropriate version of this instead of some dude that's out to just spank on dudes' bottoms left and right. It's like that person that like just overtakes a conversation and they just do everything in their power to keep the conversation going with you. And in your brain, you've kind of noped out, but you just have that decision-making moment where you have to decide, do I just have to be abrupt and kind of be portrayed as rude and get out of this? Or do I just have to live through it? And I feel like this is maybe like the high school senior equivalent of this. Maybe not. Maybe I'm off base.
Are you a baseball fan?
Yeah, I don't. sports is not as much a part of my day in and day out life now as a father and trying to, find jobs and start a podcast and this, that, and the other. But I have plenty of appreciation for baseball across the years. And I certainly played in my share of games, at least down in the wee, like elementary school levels, before ultimately determining I was not much of an athlete.
Well, in 2010, my Texas Rangers were in the World Series against the Giants, and we lost. And we lost partially because of one pitcher, Tim Lincecum. Tim Lincecum looks so much like Mitch. It is scary how very similar they look, especially at this time in 2010 when he was on the Giants. Fast forward a few years and he becomes a Ranger and he cut his hair off. But I still, every time I see him, I think of Mitch from this movie because they look so similar. And he even had like the long hair, just like Mitch. Just every time I see him, that's all I can think.
Yeah, what's kind of amusing when you say that, because I'm glad you brought that up. It's something I'd forgotten, but I definitely recall. I can picture in my brain now, like Tim Lincecum, however his name is pronounced. That like the resemblance and how it's been pointed out probably by sportscasters in the past. But the amusing thing about all that is the actor that portrayed Mitch, Wiley Wiggins, had never played baseball in his life when he came on set to film those scenes. Richard Linklater, who he was the mastermind behind a lot of the story of this movie, and both the character Mitch and Pink were he based them on himself at his different stages in high school, just in two different characters in the movie.
I can see that.
So since Linklater based the Mitch character on himself, that's why he was playing baseball. That's why he was the pitcher. So he tried to give him some pointers, but ultimately it just didn't work out. And they had to call in a stunt double just to get through. It's funny. I know that anecdote, but then the last time I watched, I still forgot to watch to see if there's like some very obvious, like, editing done to make it look like he knows what he's doing, even though he really did not.
No, I don't think so, because I pay attention to those kind of things and I didn't even notice. It's pretty good.
All right. Maybe in the extended version.
Yeah. Maybe, because I didn't even notice. So I think it's really interesting. So this movie came out when my sister was in high school, and Can't Hardly Wait came out while I was in high school. And these are very similar movies. And one part that I really enjoy, which I feel like obviously whoever wrote Can't Hardly Wait must have seen this movie and must have loved it, because when they're driving around and everybody has like their own, I don't want to say silhouette, but basically they have their own little moment together, like the characters wise. So we have everybody driving around and everybody's having different conversations in this movie. Like some of them are singing to the radio. Some are talking about who called them a bitch. And then some of them are talking about getting stoned. And it just reminds me of Can't Hardly Wait when we're meeting all the characters who are going to this party. And I just really find that interesting. And then later on in the film, one of the characters, actually think it's the stoner guy, Slater. He talks about Martha. Martha Washington. Yeah, she's a hip lady. And that is what, oh God, I can't think of his name. I want to call him Marshall. Jason Segel. He says that and Can't Hardly Wait, but he's talking about Velma from Scooby-Doo. She's a hip lady. So I just thought it was so interesting that they have that in both movies. And I really enjoy. Have you ever seen Can't Hardly Wait?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because you're right. It fits well into like the genre, I guess, right? That high school era. But it's also kind of period piece sort of, but it's still telling like a timeless type of story at the same time. Yeah. And I think that's why these type of movies still hold value to this day. And you're right, Can't Hardly Wait is like the fast forward to the, I don't know, we'll call it like whatever, mid to later 90s version, you could almost say, of Dazed and Confused. Yeah, I totally see that parallel. That's a great call out.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. And that's actually one of our favorite movies here on our podcast. And we reviewed it for our 100th episode because we loved it so much. Let's see here. Oh, so let's talk about Mr. Matthew McConaughey. How old is he supposed to be in this movie?
I want to say he's probably
at least 3
early
years.
20s. Yeah. I think the character is meant to be early 20s to be kind. Yeah. But at the same time, I think they purposely got actors that were of a specific age range, like whether, obviously down for like the freshmen and lower high school age kids, going all the way down to like, I think 14, all the way up to, I think around 22, although the character who plays Don lied about his age. He was actually 26, but he said he was younger in order to get the part. So I want to believe that the idea was that no one was older than perhaps, 21 or 22, and Wooderson being on the top of that scale at the time. So again, he's such a universal. Well, my perspective on it is he's a fairly universally loved character, but he does not, under any microscope, whether it's in a 1976 viewpoint or a 2023 or anywhere in between, he doesn't come out looking that great. No. It is like somehow he got shined up into like the best possible version. And I will tell you my theory on this. I think some of this might be proven, so I'm not going to act like I'm some mastermind, like putting together all the dots on some board in my office. But there was a fun fact: the on-screen couple that was portrayed by Mila Jovovich and a young actor by the name of Shawn Andrews actually mirrored their off-screen relationship throughout filming. And Andrews was said to have a very inflated ego, and it put off a lot of the cast, the crew, you name it. And Linklater ultimately decided to scale back a lot of the parts of the film that they were going to be involved in, and in some cases replacing his character in scenes with McConaughey's, because he was an unknown coming into this movie. It was his first time acting, and everyone was so I don't know, they just took warmly to him that Linklater decided, all right, let's see if we can flesh out this character a little bit more. And I mean, maybe there might have been some of the producers involved in this. I'm not trying to give all the credit to Linklater necessarily. And thus, I think his character may have been intended to have a little bit more negative portrayal initially, who's to say, but kind of got ascended to a higher, billing status in this movie when it was all said and done, just based on the strength of what we now know as, the master that is Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah. The main problem that we have with him, and again, when I saw this as a younger person, it didn't bother me, but now being an adult, I'm like, dude, that the high school girls stay the same age and he just gets older. That's not a good look at all. Yeah,
that's an unfortunate thing. Is some of the great quotable lines from this movie just they don't work in many contexts other than people, sharing their love for this specific movie.
Yeah, because and then he also he has so many good one-liners. When he asks Mitch, he says, "Do you have a joint?" He's like, "No, man." He goes, "It'd be a lot cooler if you did." And then immediately says, "All right, all right, all right." You're just like, what is this? Yeah.
And what's great about the movie is that the actors and actresses were given a lot of opportunity to sort of improv, improvise throughout the movie. And so, from what I understand, if I've done my research correctly, some of the most noted lines in the movie, starting with "All right, all right, all right," that was Matthew McConaughey's idea that they let fly in the movie. I don't know if just kind of jumping back to when we were talking about the earlier, freshman orientation stages, but when what is the actress's name? Parker Posey. When Parker Posey says, "Wipe that face off your head, B," that was something she originally just like pulled from something she had heard someone say in like a high school production once or something. And there's a couple others, but again, it's just amazing. These iconic phrases that come from this movie, they weren't something that was like came together by a Hollywood writer. It was all by these like young, just ready to kind of get their chance to shine actors and actresses, just all hanging out and having a good time together. It would, to be quite honest, by all indications, both on set and off set.
Yeah. One thing that I thought was really interesting is one of the girls, I don't have her name, but she's not wrong about Gilligan's Island and how unfair that is for poor Marianne and Ginger. They have no good options except for the professor. But there's only one professor, and then they're stuck with either having the Skipper or Gilligan. Not good. It's unfair.
Yeah, well, thankfully we've come a long way. There's far better representation in so many different shapes and forms now. I would love to see what the 2023 reboot of Gilligan's Island would look like.
Oh God!
Because no one's gonna. No, I guarantee you this. No one's gonna be able to have that bathroom conversation about that reboot. Everybody's gonna be in equal proximity to their value and sexiness and chemistry. So everybody gets what they want. But I'm not saying that's a complaint. I'm just saying that just feels like where life is now.
Yeah. I wanted to say, Mitch, what the hell are you wearing? He's wearing like a floral shirt. But then you look around at the party and some of the other scenes and you're like, no, that fits in with everybody else's attire. I love all their fancy shirts. Yeah.
And again, if it wasn't for the fact that especially knowing that this was meant to portray like Richard Linklater's character, so he's kind of sort of like underlying like hero character, so to speak. He doesn't really portray well as like the cool up and coming freshman,
right?
To me, but like for starters, like, dude, what is wrong? Like what? Like get yourself some allergy cream to deal with whatever you got going on with your nose.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but people have come up with a drinking game based on like take a drink, take a shot every time he touches his nose. Yeah. That was all the actor, I think. But man, I couldn't figure out like what his deal was.
Yeah, I think it's not being a good actor. Everybody kind of has like a tell in poker, but they also kind of have that as actors. And when they don't know what to do with their hands, they tend to do weird stuff. And clearly that was his tick. And he couldn't stop. Could not stop.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. That makes perfect sense.
But on the other hand, I love the overalls that one of the characters wear, the football guy. I can't think of his name.
I want to say that's Don. That's the one that was the dude that was actually 26. If I remember correctly, man, I don't want to come off like sounding like I love this movie and then getting that part wrong.
Yeah, Don. Mm-hmm. It's Sasha Jensen.
Yep, that does sound correct. Good job.
Yeah. I love his overalls. There's a lot of cool outfits in this movie. A lot of weird ones, but definitely his overalls are really cool. And then obviously Slater and his weed shirt. He really just lets you know that that's what he's about, man.
Yeah, and I don't think that hat ever comes off his head. It was probably part of the fact that I think he was wearing a wig. But regardless, I think in character, I don't know if that hat ever comes off that kid's head.
Yeah, and how does one stay incredibly high all day? Just all day.
The only thing I can think is that maybe it has something to do with like, the brain's like ongoing growth and development at that age in life. And maybe it just hits differently. Or it could have, the argument could be made that maybe, back in the 70s, this is before everything got all incredibly genetically modified. And it was just when it was, when at its best and most intended to be, who's to say? But it also, that could just be a fault of pop culture portrayal, because I don't know. I can't say I associate with anyone that's ever been able to achieve that every minute of the day I'm on an elevated level measure of success. I guess that at least, one character in this movie seems to be able to do on the regular.
Right. I also love when they are driving around and they stop at one point and they're drinking beers, and Benny is like, "You just wasted that beer," because they give it to the kid that they just beat up. And then Ben Affleck's character throws one, and the guy's like, "Dude, you just wasted another one." That would be me. I feel like I would be very concerned about waste like that. Like if I brought a whole thing of Cokes and people were just throwing them, I'd be a little pissed, a little butthurt about that. What character do you think that you resemble the most in this movie?
Sadly, it's not going to be anything super cool. I would say in terms of where I was in high school, whether you call it at any point in time, I think Tony is the character that I think resonated closely to high school version of Robert. And just that I was, rolling with the higher GPA type, but at the same time I had there were branches to my tree that reached out into the other social groups, but I had led a little bit of a sheltered life. So I was very shy and apprehensive to everything. But when you present me with the scenario where I can start to consume this type of experience, whether it's, socializing with a girl where I can make some sexual innuendo where I might not have been able to before, or going to a party and drinking beer and just, walking around and talking to people all night like everybody else does, you start to come out of your shell and thrive a little bit more. And that's what was, I feel like, portrayed with the mini arc of his character through the movie for the most part. So that's, I feel like the closest one. As much as I would love to say I was like Pink, that dude that was just super cool. Everybody thought he was the coolest and all the girls wanted to be with him and all the dudes wanted to be him. Nope, that was not me, sadly.
So don't take offense to this, but every time I see this movie and Tony's character's on the screen, all I can think is he seems like a child molester of some sort. Just, I don't know what his look is. Like, he looks like he could be a murderer or just something. Maybe it's his hair with the pale skin and the glasses. It's giving me like cult vibe. I don't know. Not a fan of that. Like, yeah, Anthony Rapp is okay. I don't know what it is about him in this movie that I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah. To be very clear, I don't say, I would not say I was like a resemblance by any means. It was more of a character comparison. But I totally get where you're coming from with that. It's one of those things where I just look at him and I say, how does he get the girl? Yeah. But again, you gotta let the little guy get his win sometimes. In terms of, I guess, how I looked at that time, maybe if you like pushed him and I forget his friend's name, but
Mike Newhouse.
If it was like, if it was a Jewish version of him and you mash them together and whatever that kind of person ends up looking like, I think is probably what would have been a close approximation to me. But that's just, right off the top of my
head. And the fact that he's like so hung up on this 14-year-old just really makes it creepier to me. I'm just like, dude, that's not a good look. You could have the redhead. She seems available. We know that Matthew McConaughey's character likes her. He digs redheads. Like, go after her. Why are you going after a 14-year-old?
Now, I will say that is one area where my high school experience did align, in that it did feel like there was like a a recurring, I don't even know what to put, like, I don't want to call it expectation, but it was just like a part of like the circle of high school life that inevitably high school seniors, typically the boys, would flock after, you know, the prime freshman girls and, you know, try to, you know, lock them into, you know, girlfriend experiences and go from there. So I definitely saw a bit of that in my upbringing. So you're right. It still gives a bit of a weird vibe. Maybe it might be just a matter of like the actual ages of the actors themselves that probably doesn't help things. I don't know. I don't have that right in front of me, but I get it. But at the same time, it was, I don't know. I think that was like a very commonplace thing in the high school, you know, way of life.
Yeah. Like in my head, when they're in high school, actually like in high school, it doesn't seem that wrong, but she was literally in an 8th grade class earlier that day. It just seems weird.
Very, very good point. Yeah. When you throw that little piece in, suddenly, especially the dad in me cringes a little bit more back and goes, "Ooh, yeah, remember they still got a whole summer before they become their true freshman selves. You predator, you." So, okay, you just won me over there. Good job. Yay! That was fantastic.
One other thing I noticed, is Adam Goldberg. He's Mike Newhouse when he's in the back of the car and he's having his rant about being a lawyer and not wanting to represent those people. And then they're like, "Well, so what do you want to do?" And he goes, "I want to dance."
Yeah. So
where did that come from?
If you took that one moment from him in the movie alone and then asked me the question earlier about which character, like that's me in a nutshell at that point in my life, was like everyone expected me to do these certain things. Like, you got to go into computers. You can't go to that school. You got to go to that school. And in reality, all I wanted to tell them is, yeah, y'all, I just want to dance. But that's, you know, but all you can really do is say that to your friend. Or, you know, because back then they didn't have podcasts. But so, yeah, I get it. But then a lot of the things that he does as the movie progresses is where he veers farther away from the type of behavior I exhibited at that point in my life. But yeah, I do enjoy that one moment. It feels so authentic, even though it's still like presented in an over the top way.
And I wonder if that was improv, because that seems like something that would be improv.
I have to imagine. I bet you that could very well have been the case.
But it's also so good that maybe it wasn't, you know? I don't know. I just love his delivery of, "I want to dance." So do you dance then?
No, I'm not like a professional. No, but I like to kind of put it into a better perspective. I'm like one of those, when you get me in a good, like, you know, confidence phase, like, you know, like 2 a.m. had that many beverages and I'm still awake phase. And then you like get me up on a karaoke stage or something, you know, something to that effect. Then like the true performer in me takes over, let's say, but I'm not trying to make any claim to fame.
2 drinks in and you're at a wedding. you go for it.
Yeah, just give me the stage and the belief that I am not going to be booed out of the building and watch me shine.
So when you were in high school, would you have signed a letter stating that you will abstain from drugs and alcohol while you're playing a sport?
Well, for me, I guess the closest, there's 2 ways to look at this. Closest approximation would have been, I guess in this case, if my high school had offered golf as the sport, which they didn't. We tried, but we were just that small of a school. So again, didn't get any sports. But for me in real life, if you put it into like an academic equivalent, like you can't take part in the quiz bowl team unless you sign this commitment letter. I will say the junior going into senior version of me probably would have taken a bit of a pink stance with it. I've got a little boring story in the chamber that involves the National Honor Society. I don't know if you're familiar or not, but yes. I was top of my class all 4 years of high school, but for some reason they never wanted to accept me until my senior year, because the tradition was the top 10 is always accepted into the National Honor Society. And I said, well, guess what? This is the first year where that's not going to happen. And so I guess that was my closest moment to not signing a letter of commitment was, nope, I'm just going to not have National Honor Society on my, college applications and resume and whatnot. And I turned out just fine.
Do you think it hurt you not having that on there though?
There's an alternate reality universe version of me that was, the real version of me was very passionate about going to the University of Michigan. There's an alternate reality version of me that would have gone full force into trying to attend that school. And I think that version of me would have just, ate my shoe and just gone through the experience just to say, yes, I achieved this. Now please accept me. But that's not the reality of the life that was Robert Haller.
So
up to that point,
I would have signed it because I was a goody two shoes and I didn't do drugs. I still have never even smoked pot. Have I tried to? I would have, but I haven't. So I probably would have signed it because I wasn't getting drunk or smoking pot anyways. So I'm not.
Well, we'll get. Yeah, that's okay. I'll go full transparency with you here, and I'll just give you a little description of myself. I was totally the goody two shoes, but by that point, again, I'll say as through my high school experience, definitely by the time of my junior going into senior year of high school, I was the goody two shoes, but I wanted to impress all of my friends and prove to them that I was a rebel. So any chance where I felt like goody two shoes me felt like there was an opportunity to be a rebel and ultimately it not harm my life in any sort of crazy manner. I was going to do it and profit. But so again, I can relate to what you're saying, the type of person you were at that point in time. There was a lot of me that was all about towing the line. Towing the line because I know that when adulthood comes around, that's when I'm going to get to do stuff. But for now, I just need to get through this thing. Yeah.
When I was in high school, I got so fed up with my art teacher that I quit my senior year and I didn't take art. And I found out later that actually screwed me up for college when I decided, because I was not going to study art. I was going to study psychology and then I didn't. And then I ended up studying art and I screwed myself by not taking that class my senior year. So, whatever.
Yeah, that's best way I try to look at all of it is that everything happens for some reason. I'm not really care to try to give anybody the answer as to any explanation why that is, but I just try to remind myself it all happened for a reason. I'm here right now. I'm doing this, so it all happened for a reason.
I just like that the paper keeps following him. Everybody keeps giving it back to him, and he's like, "How am I going to get rid of this? It just won't go away."
Yeah, and what's really funny is because his friends are none of Pink's friends really come off, aside from his side friendship with the group of intellectuals. They do not seem like they're pillars of the community.
No.
So it's interesting to me that they give the impression that they've all just signed it, not given it a second thought, and then they're just giving a middle finger to it behind the coach's back. And then you if you pay close enough attention, you can see as the paper is kind of making its way, I think at least at most points in the movie, from what I can recall, making its way from one person to another to still kind of get fed back to Pink in hopes that he will sign it.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know. Yeah, it's just interesting to me that they all just so willingly went on board with it. But I don't know.
Oh my goodness. I just thought about this. So in this movie, we have the letter and he keeps getting it brought to him in different ways and he keeps getting rid of it and it keeps coming back. Just like the letter from Can't Hardly Wait.
Oh, wow.
I just thought about that.
Boy, it's funny because something I did earlier this year when I found myself now with a lot of extra time to kill because I didn't have a job that involved me traveling here, there, and everywhere and, working 50 hours a week. I decided to dive a little deeper into something that I loved, and I bought a book. I guess again a behind the scenes narrative. What do they call it? Like post-mortem narrative of the making of Dazed and Confused, and then the cultural phenomenon from that point forward. And I guess the point being is I would just love to see if there's something like that for the movie Can't Hardly Wait, where they reveal, oh yeah, this was totally an homage to Dazed and Confused, and we we love this movie, or I don't know. I'd love to know a little bit more. I'm glad you keep making those comparisons, because it totally makes sense to see those kind of things recur in later movies when, again, it's had such a great impact. It wasn't a success at the box office by any means back then, but again, the great thing we've learned over the last handful of decades is that it doesn't need to succeed initially. It just needs to have a fandom that cares, and it can carry on forever. And Dazed and Confused seems like it's one that keeps carrying on and thriving.
So one thing that I spotted in the background of this movie, no one is going to care about this, but I just wanted to say it. So in one of the scenes when they're at the party, people are in the truck, and behind them is some lawn chairs in the bed of the truck. We had those exact same lawn chairs for years growing up. And as soon as I saw them, I was like, hey, those are our lawn chairs. No. Yeah,
I think a lot of people had those lawn chairs back in the day, to be quite honest.
But it was those exact same color, and I was like, "What? I haven't seen those in forever." Very fun.
Yeah, again, another thing was even though it's set in the 70s, this is something that is at least very uniquely cool to me. Is that this movie that is set in the 70s and it was released in the early 90s? That I didn't really find out about. I started reading about it on the internet in the early 2000s, has then affected me and all of these fans to the point where they're still celebrating, having huge celebrations in Texas at the 20th, the 25th, probably had one for the 30th anniversary. I don't know. I didn't look it up to be clearer, but it's just it speaks to the point that there just has to be pieces in this movie that just always connect in some way, like for like, to the human experience, regardless of where we are at what point in time.
And one last thing that I have about this movie and Slater is I love this when they're at the top of the moon tower.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, imagine how many people are out there fucking, man. Just doing it.
You said that. You said Slater said that line, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he kind of comes off as a guy that he hangs around with all the cool kids, but just wishes he had more swagger, because he kind of there's a conversation earlier in the movie where he talks about not being with very many girls, and he's making the argument it's about quality, not it's not quantity, it's quality, or something like that. So I think part of him is probably inexperienced, probably we'll just say a virgin, and just very, very intrigued by all of that, and just he's a high school boy, so yeah, he's gonna be bringing that stuff up at any given moment.
But then I thought about it. I was like, yeah, there probably is a lot of people out there just doing it right now. You just probably. And I have never thought of that. It's a good thought. It's a good argument. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, and if you find yourself thinking about it too much, just tell yourself right afterward. I bet right now there's a lot of people out there pooping.
Yep, that's true. That there's probably more people out there pooping right now than doing it.
So many more. Many more. See, now your brain's out of the gutter and in the sewer.
I don't know which one I'd rather be. So is there anything else about this movie that you love or you hate or you don't understand?
No, I think we've covered a lot of it, but I think one thing that's central about the movie, especially the story arc for Pink, is just this idea that he doesn't want to look at this as the best days of his life. There's a very key scene late in the movie where he says, if someone, tells me, or if I say this is the best years of my life, someone tell me to kill myself. I'm probably butchering the exact verbiage, but I think it speaks very well to especially as we get further into adulthood, go through seasons of change or just getting older, that whether you call it the good old days, the best years of your life, whatever, I'm willing to bet that no matter where you were in your life, when you consider that, the good old days, the best days of my life, that version of past you was always looking forward to better days ahead.
Yeah.
So I think that's something really great to take away, is that, Pink is just trying to figure out, not how to make these the best days, but how he's going to make the next days, or the next, part of his life, perhaps the best years of his life. He doesn't want to necessarily just make this about just living in the now. I don't know, maybe I'm giving way too much deep thought to it, but just something else that I really love when I try to find some level of bigger meaning to this movie, so I can try to validate the fact that I'm, a man in my early 40s and I love a high school, air quotation, stoner comedy so much.
That's one thing we didn't bring up, is Pink and his girlfriend Simone. I forget that they're together, even though we see them at the very beginning of the movie. For some reason in my head, I always think it's him and Mitch's sister that are together. And they just seem better together than him and Simone.
Right. And then they tease it late in the movie.
Yeah.
But then she, I don't know, man, I got to be careful what I say there, but I'm not a big fan of her in that moment, because she totally lures Pink out there and makes the first move.
Yeah.
And then when he's like, all right, cool, you've convinced me, I'm a high school boy, I like girls. And then he's getting into it. Then she's like, oh, wait, don't you have a girlfriend? Sorry. That, bro, you made all of this happen. But you're right. The point you're making, like but I also feel like in some ways that is kind of a semi-accurate portrayal of some high school relationships where a guy and a girl are together, or maybe they've been together for a while, or who knows, but maybe it's just a high school thing and they're just not that close, or they just haven't really gotten that comfortable with each other. And that's just, they just like to make out sometimes. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it could be indicative of like a very like not so serious high school relationship in just movie portrayal form. But again, that might just be me way overthinking that particular aspect.
So this is the time for us to rate the movie. So we rate it 1 out of 10, 10 being the best, and then we rate it something out of the movie. So I'll go first to explain it. I would give this movie probably a 7 out of 10. Mitch's floral shirts. Yeah.
Okay. I will give it, man, I almost want to cheat. I'll give it 8 out of 10. All right. But I really want to say 3 out of 3. All right.
All right.
Exactly.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And if anybody wants to hear your podcast or get in touch with you to tell you about their shirts, where can they reach you?
Sure. You can get in touch with me at hallerifyouhearme@gmail.com. That's right. Haller if you hear me. HALLER. You can find the podcast on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn, still trying to find that next career opportunity. And the podcast itself, which is technically titled #OpenToWorkJourneys with Robert Haller, can be found on most major podcasting platforms. And if not, it'll probably get added soon because, like I said earlier, every week I'm trying to do something new to kind of chase this dream I've had of podcasting. So hopefully you'll give me a chance. And feel free to reach out if you're interested in being a guest sometime, or just some good old feedback, because boy howdy would I love to keep doing this kind of stuff, including being guests on great shows like yours, Sarah.
Oh, thank you. And if anybody wants to reach out to us to tell me about this movie and what kind of floral shirt you like, you can find us everywhere at Two Chicks Talkin Flicks. And until next time, toodles! This episode was produced by Two Chicks Talkin Flicks. Music was produced by Michael Girvani. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to be a part of the show, have a movie suggestion, or just want to give us some love, you can email us at twochickstalkinflicks@gmail.com. Thanks, guys. Toodles.